Hey everybody, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution Scriptures, and we're continuing on with the story of Saul today, King Saul. He's been in battle. He had one of his first battles in our last episode, and his army was suffering fatigue and running for their lives, and he was told to wait for Samuel to come and tell him what to do next and offer up sacrifices and all that. He got tired of waiting, and he decided to offer up sacrifices himself, and he wasn't permitted to offer those particular sacrifices. So Sam's gone off his face at him, and Saul's gone off his face at Sam, and Samuel's basically told him, you're not going to be the king. Your family is not going to be royal. The dynasty's stopping with you. Yeah? And of course, Saul didn't take it seriously. So the battle's continuing in this episode here. If you have a look, I'm going to talk a little bit about Honeycomb later. It's a really fascinating understanding. But for now, Saul's still fighting. We come to Samuel chapter 14. The Philistines moved their camp to the pass at Michmash, and Saul was in Gibeah with his 600 men. Saul's own tent was set up under a pomegranate tree by the threshing place at the edge of town. And since this was a set-apart war, 𝗥𝗑𝗑 was serving Saul as his high priest, wearing Yahusha's ephod and giving answers from Yahusha with the Urim and the Thummim stones. 𝗥𝗑𝗑 was the great grandson of Eli. Interesting. So we're still continuing this line of Eli, the priests, even though Yahusha said that your family's not going to be priests anymore. This guy, because of Saul, 𝗥𝗑𝗑, is still the priest. Great-grandson of Eli, the high priest in Shiloh who raised Sam. And his father was Ahitub, uncle was Ichabod, and grandfather was Phinehas. So this point here is interesting. The two high priests, we're coming into two high priests. Remember, we're not going to go into the whole thing again, but there was see down here, the priest wars. Eli's family was allied with the northern tribes. 8 or so northern tribes. Eli's family, the priests, were allied with the northern tribes just like Saul was. Saul's tribe was allied to the northern tribes too. So 𝗥𝗑𝗑 was Saul's logical choice. However, when David became king, which we're coming into in a few chapters, he was from the southern tribe of Judah, the royal tribe of Judah. So therefore, David didn't want a priesthood family dynasty that was loyal to the northern tribes. He wanted a southern tribal priest, which is Zadok's family. So we're going to come into that. So remember the priest wars? Eli's line wasn't of the proper firstborn lineage, and King Saul has the opportunity to do what's right and put the proper high priest back into power. Remember, the line should have been going down from Aaron's oldest son, but Eli wasn't. He was from the youngest son. So Saul could have fixed that. He's the king. But he didn't. He doesn't. Saul instead decides that 𝗥𝗑𝗑 was to continue on as his administration's high priest, because he and Eli's family were aligned with the 8 northern tribes. And since Saul's tribe, Benjamin, was part of the same coalition, naturally they recognized 𝗥𝗑𝗑 as their own high priest and ignored the other one. And Saul wasn't about to rock the boat, as he was mostly concerned with gaining loyalty. So that's just a little bit to say that Saul's getting ready for battle again, and he's got his high priest there with him with the Urim and Thummim stones. He's got the ephod, making decisions. Anyway, one day, Jonathan, King Saul's son, told the soldier who carried his weapons that he wanted to attack the Philistine camp on the other side of the valley. So they slipped out of the Israelite camp without anyone knowing. In fact, John didn't even tell his father Saul that he was leaving. John decided to get to the Philistine camp by going through the pass that led between Shiny Cliff and Michmash to the north, and Thornbush Cliff and Gibeah to the south. And John talked with his armor bearer as they went towards the Philistine camp. It's just the two of us against all those uncircumcised savages. But Yahuwah our Elohim can easily help a few lone soldiers win a battle. the same way he can a whole army. So maybe he'll give us victory today. I've got your back, mate, the armor bearer said. I've got your back, mate, no matter what. Wherever we go, wherever you think. We go wherever you think. Okay, well, this is what we'll do then. Let's go across and let the enemy see us. If they agree to come down the hill and fight where we are, then we won't bother climbing up to their camp. But if they provoke us and tell us to come up and fight, we bloody will. And that'll be the sign that Yahuwah is going to fight with us and let us win. So he's sort of seeking a sign from Yahusha in a sense, based on what's going to happen. If they come down, then all right, we'll fight. We won't go up and conquer them. But if they provoke us and tell us to come up, we will. So John and his armor bearer stood at the bottom of the hill where the Philistines could see them. And the Philistines said, "Hey Bruce, check this out. Look at those worthless Israelites who's crawled out of their holes from hiding." So they're having a go at him. And they yelled down to John and his soldier, "Oi, come up here and we'll teach you both a thing or two." So John turned to his soldier. "Follow me, mate. Yahuwah's going to smash him." So he's got the sign he wanted. They're provoking him. "Come on up here." These two guys on their lookout. "Hey, Bruce, check out this guy. Get down there. Look at him." So we're going to go and smash him. So John crawled up the hillside with his soldier right behind him. And when they got to the top, he killed the Philistines who attacked from the front. And his soldier killed those who attacked from behind. And before they'd even gotten 100 feet, they'd already killed about 20 Philistines. And the whole Philistine army panicked. Those in camp, those on guard duty, those in the fields, and those on raiding patrols. All of them were afraid and confused. Then Yahusha sent an earthquake, and the whole ground began to shake. So Yahusha's working with John, isn't he? John had no idea that the terrain would be so beneficial that they could fight off these enemy soldiers. He moved in belief, and, as with us, one successful step of belief leads to the next, and the next, and the next. Listen and do, listen and do. So in the Hebrew, it sort of says that based on the topography of the land, they basically went into a kind of a narrow canyon of sorts. So they could almost fight them one at a time, two at a time. So that's why they could just raid through these soldiers. So that's happening. Jonathan's having victory. Meanwhile, Saul's lookouts at Geba saw that the Philistine army was running around like ants in every direction. And Saul told his officers, "Call the roll, will you? And find out who's left the camp." And they realized that John and his armor bearer were missing. And Saul said to Achiah, his high priest, "Bring the ark of Yahuwah here, and let's ask Yahuwah what we should do." Last we heard, the ark was at Kiriath Yearim, in the home of a priest, but it was usually carried to the site of the battle because this was set apart war apparently. So the ark would have been there in some capacity, whether it was on show or whether it was in a tent or who knows. But just as Saul finished saying this, he could see that the Philistine army camp was getting more and more chaotic and confused. And he said, "Don't worry, Achiah. Put your hands down, mate." And Achiah took his hands out of the pockets because that's what he was doing with the Urim and the Thummim, seeking answers from Yahusha. So he's got his hands in there, twiddling with his stones. And because it was pretty much, these stones were pretty much a yes. It was written there anyway. Look, it's written right there. "Don't worry, Achiah. Put your hands down, mate." And Achiah took his hands out of the pockets in his ephod, where he'd been tinkering with the Urim and Thummim to get a yes or no answer from Yahusha. You could pretty much only get a yes or no answer, almost like rolling a dice with only two numbers on it. Heads or tails, really, like spinning a coin. So that's how the Urim and Thummim generally worked. So he's asked Achiah to go in there and get an answer, but then he can see something happening on the horizon. He goes, "Don't worry, mate. Don't worry. Put your hands down, mate. I'll work it out myself." Then Saul, more confident in his own decisions, quickly called his army together, led them to the Philistine camp. And by this time, the enemy was so disorientated and freaked out, they were killing each other. There were also some hired soldiers in the Philistine camp who'd now switched to Israel's side and fought for Saul and Jonathan. Many Israelites had been hiding in the hill country of Ephraim, and when they heard that the Philistines were running away terrified, they came out of hiding and joined in fighting the Philistines. So Yahusha helped Israel fight against the Philistines that day. Saul had earlier told his soldiers, get this guy's an idiot. Saul had earlier told his soldiers, it's payback time for those bastard Philistines, and I want it done by sunset. We don't relent, we don't break, we don't rest, we don't even stop to scratch our ass until I've got vengeance on my enemies. On my enemies. Do you hear me? We've got one chance here. So if any of you stop to eat before we're done, you'll be under a curse. So he made them swear not to eat. He actually took out an official vow, invoking the name of Yahusha. If anybody eats, they'll be under a curse. They're in battle, for goodness sake. They need all the energy they can get. He's just shooting himself in the foot, isn't he? So, despite its irrational and unwarranted nature, this oath made by Saul was a very serious matter and absolutely valid in Yahusha's eyes. He made it clear in Exodus, Leviticus, and Judges that he's not in the business of seeking vows and oaths from his people as a sign of their obedience and relationship with him. In fact, later in the Gospels we'll see him advising against vows. Remember that? Don't make vows and promises, the sun and the moon and the earth, don't make vows and don't, just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Remember he says that? So he's later advising in the Gospels not against vows, not because they were tradition, superstition, or no longer in operation, but because they remained just as powerful and effective as they did in the ancient days. So if someone chose to get involved with one, they were obligated to follow through. Otherwise, the attached curses will be on their head. So, these oaths and vows were legit, but you were told not to go into them lightly. And as we saw Yahusha say, don't make them at all. Just be practical. Just let your yes be yes, your no be no. If you're gonna say yes, show up, do it. If you can't, just say no. Anyway, King Saul says, no food until I've got vengeance on my enemies. Interesting that it's his enemies, isn't it? It's all about him, my enemies. I want vengeance. Not Yahusha's war, Yahusha's enemies, mine. Once anointed, Saul quickly adopts the behavior of a tyrannical dictator, making another rash, unnecessary oath. So they're in the middle of fighting. His army's exhausted and they're not allowed to eat. And by the time the fighting moved past Beth-aven, the Israelite troops were completely exhausted and weak from hunger. The army and the people who lived nearby had gone into a forest, and they came to a place where honey was dripping on the ground. But no one stopped to eat any of it because they were afraid of being put under a curse because of Saul's stupid oath. But Jonathan didn't know about Saul's warning to the soldiers, so he dipped the end of his walking stick into the honeycomb and ate some with his fingers. Then he felt stronger and more alert, like the rest of the army could have. And a soldier nearby told him, "What are you doing? Your father swore that anyone who ate food today would be put under a curse, and we agreed not to eat. That's why we're all so weak." What a ridiculous thing to say. My father is causing you all so much trouble today. Look at me. I only had a bit from this honeycomb, and I feel great already. I wish you'd eaten some of the food the Philistines left behind. Then you'd be stronger, and we would have been able to kill a lot more of them. While the other soldiers were duty-bound to this oath and would have suffered at Yahusha's hand had they disobeyed, John wasn't there, nor agreed to it. So Yahusha had kept him busy elsewhere so that he wasn't affected by Saul's stupid oath, which had weakened his own army. So Jonathan and his armor bearer were up the hill fighting the Philistines. He wasn't there when Saul made this oath. Anyway, by evening, the Israelite army was so exhausted from killing Philistines all the way from Michmash to Ajalon that they grabbed the food they'd captured from the Philistines and started eating. They even killed sheep and cows and calves right on the ground and ate the meat without draining the blood. Now, that doesn't mean they ate it raw. They're not just complete savages. They didn't just start hacking their teeth into raw meat. No, they cooked it, but they didn't drain any of it. There's just blood everywhere. And they're eating, they're just not abiding by the clean, kosher ritual, instructions given to them by Moses. So they're eating blood. Then someone told Saul, "Look, the army is disobeying Yahuwah by eating meat before the blood drains out." "You're right," Saul answered. "They are being disgusting and disobedient to Yahuwah. Hurry, roll a big rock over here. Tell everyone in the camp to bring their cattle and lambs to me. Then they can kill the animals on this rock, let the blood drain, and then eat the meat. That way, no one will disobey Yahuwah by eating meat with the blood still in it." So that night, the soldiers brought their cattle over to the big rock and killed them there. It was the first proper altar Saul had built for offering sacrifices to Yahusha. So he's still interested. He's still trying to be obedient here and there, isn't he, Saul? He's just a bit cuckoo. Then Saul said, "Let's attack the Philistines again while it's still dark. We can fight them all night. Let's kill them and take everything they own." "We'll do whatever you want," the people said. "Wait, let's ask Yahuwah what we should do," 𝗥𝗑𝗓 the high priest said. So Saul asked Yahusha, "Should I attack the Philistines? Will you help us win?" But this time Yahusha didn't answer. So Saul called his army officers together and said, "We have to find out what we've done to stop Yahuwah from speaking to us. I swear by his living name that whoever caused this must die, even if it's my own son Jonathan." And no one said a word. So Saul told his army, "You stand on that side of the priest, and then John and I will stand on the other side." And everyone agreed. Then Saul spoke to Yahusha, "Our Yahuwah, Elohim of Yisrael, why haven't you answered me today? Please show us who's disobeyed you. Was it my son John and I, or was it your people Yisrael?" And the army came back, the answer came back that Jonathan or Saul had behaved disobediently, not the army. So Saul told 𝗥𝗑𝗓, "Ask Yahuwah to decide between Jonathan and I." And the answer came back that it was John. "Jonathan," Saul scolded, "tell me what you did." "I dipped the end of my walking stick into a honeycomb and ate some. And now you're saying I have to die for that?" "Dickhead." "Yes, John, I swore to Yahuwah, and you broke it." "That's bullcrap," the soldiers shouted. "Yahuwah helped Jonathan win the battle for us, so we won't let you kill him. We swear to Yahuwah that we won't let you kill him or even lay a hand on him." So the army's coming to John's defense because John's winning the war. So the army kept Saul from killing Jonathan. Then Saul stopped hunting down the Philistines, and they all went home. At the time that Saul became king, the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, kings of Zobah, Philistines and Amalekites had all been robbing and terrorizing the Israelites. So Saul fought back against these enemies and stopped them from infringing on Israel and oppressing them. He was a brave commander and always won his battles. Let's not forget that Yahusha did anoint him. Even though as time goes on he's getting more and more cocky and full of himself, making up instructions and picking and choosing which divine instructions he's going to be obedient to. A lot of the time he's being obedient. I mean, your standard king wouldn't care if people were eating meat with blood still in it, would they? Saul did. So he still knows the instructions and he's trying to be obedient here and there. And now it says here, he was a brave commander and always won his battles. Not bad for someone who was a farmer, So Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz, and they had 3 sons, Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. They also had 2 daughters, Merab and the younger Michal. Michal was the one that David married, actually, which is in that TV show we were watching too. Abner, Saul's cousin, was the commander of the army. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were sons of Abiel. Ner. And Saul was at war with the Philistines for as long as he lived. And whenever he found a good warrior or a brave man, Saul made him join his army and fight. So that's the text today. Saul was continually fighting, and John's gone up and made a huge dent in the enemy's forces. While Saul was busy talking smack with the priests and fuss-assing around with his war council, deciding what play would make him look most impressive in everyone's eyes, making stupid, superstitious vows at the cost of his own men's lives, his son John trusted Yahusha and forged on in belief, listening, proving and doing, and had a huge victory against the Philistines. Despite being guilty of his dad's bad juju oath. I mean, please, how insane was Saul there? What a stupid oath, trying to be all spiritual and pious. We're not going to eat today. No, we are spiritual warriors. We can do this without eating. And the warriors are like, get stuffed. If you don't want to eat, don't eat. Don't make us not eat. Ridiculous. So, and they're just some pictures. Saul made war with all the surrounding nations. He basically cleaned up the perimeter. All the perimeter nations, pagan nations around Israel, which were taking advantage of their weakness in and out of the period of the judges, coming in and looting and raping and pillaging, Israel. Saul cleaned up the borders and he started not conquering the nations, but basically not letting them come in. You leave us alone. Let's talk about this honeycomb. Yeah? Honeycomb. I love honeycomb. Crunchies and violet crumbles. How luscious does that look? This might sound completely bizarre, but this word just came to me. I was reading it. I thought, that's going to be a dead end. There's not going to be anything in that word. Everyone knows what honeycomb is. Why am I looking up honeycomb? But you'll see where we go. In the Hebrew, honeycomb means shaking to pieces, a dripping like honey from the comb, to make overflow or swim, a quivering like a vibrating up and down or rocking to and fro, sprinkling, rubbing, soaring, lifting up, waving like a sacrificial offering. Talking a lot about those, haven't we? Move, offer, perfume, because it's sweet, like a perfume. Send, shake, sift, strike, elevating a situation. Elevating a situation. So that's what honeycomb means in the Hebrew. And a couple of scriptures here. The fear of Yahusha is clean, standing forever, and his instructions are totally upright, more desirable than fine gold, and sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. And if we guard them, there's great reward. The fear of Yahusha is clean, It means we want to behave ourselves for fear. We don't want that pain. We want to please him. And if we do, there's great reward. It's more desirable, particularly to him, than fine gold and sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. A wise person chooses their words very carefully so as to not offend, and is continually learning how to behave. This is in Proverbs, guys. A wise person chooses their words very carefully so as to not offend, and is continually learning how to behave. Do you think, behave, even consider that in your day? Or just a bull at a gate? Hear it and say it, no filter, Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweet to the spirit and healing to the body. There's a way that seems right to yourself, to your mind, but it always ends in death. Always hit a brick wall. You always fall flat on your face. It always ends in death, whether physical death or just a deathly feeling and a hideous consequence. This is interesting because this is the direction we're going in, because obviously up here we know what a honeycomb is in the natural, but a lot of these things are an actual behavior. Elevating a situation, being shaken to pieces, all these sort of things. And now we come into a very practical behavior here. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb. Now this message started to upset me. Normally when Yahusha gives messages that upset me, it doesn't give them to me, he gives them to someone else. And then I can get upset about it and take it personally. But this one came to me and I thought, I don't want to say this. I don't do any of this stuff, like I was so upset, because it's like looking in a mirror when you look at Yahusha's word, particularly when you're rewording it and making it 21st century lingo, So I'm looking at it and it's really lifted me a lot to see that this is what Yahusha wants from us. Pleasant words. Pleasant words. Why? Because it's sweet like honeycomb, sweet to the spirit and healing to the body. Not just to the person you're speaking to, but to yourself. So, Saul's army entered a forest region where apparently many large colonies of bees lived, and there was abundant honeycomb all over the place. Honey was a very rare, prized item, not only for its wonderful taste, but for its ability to revive a person who was in a famished or weakened condition by rapidly raising their blood sugar levels, like the way chocolate was used by the military in World War II. Like diabetics today, they either carry insulin or they carry, depending on which one you've got, soft drink, can of soft drink or jelly beans, things like that can totally revive you, if your blood sugar drops. So similar back in these days, that's what honey was for. If you saw honey, that's why Jonathan was bouncing around full of beans and all the army were exhausted. But it means more than just the sweet product we borrow from bees. In antiquity, it meant the sweet juice of almost any fruit, its nectar. The promised land of Yisrael is described as being a land flowing with milk and honey, a poetic sign of the abundance, ease, and prosperity to be found on the uncultivated land, where milk-giving goats and sheep were herded and wildflowers blossomed freely. That's why that analogy was used for the Canaan, land flowing with milk and honey. The association of honey with the divine also made it a symbol of immortality. This is interesting. As the healing properties of honey act as a natural preservative, possessing strong antiseptic qualities, full of antioxidants, helping digestion and soothing a sore throat. Most of us who've got a bit of hippiness in us know all these old wives' tale and natural remedies, don't we? Lemon and honey for a sore throat. So it's also taken on symbolically immortality as well. Where's this all going? Honeycomb, let's read this bit first, in the English, to sweeten, because up here it was talking a lot about being sweet, Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweet to the spirit. This word sweet jumped out at me a lot of times. And just in English, to sweeten is to increase in sweetness or make something sweet, to make the taste or smell of something more pleasant, to make the taste or smell of something more pleasant, like the sacrifices, the incense, the burning, to make something more attractive or desirable, to make someone more kinder or gentler. Remember, we're looking at this through the eyes of behavior. To make something more attractive or desirable, or to make someone more kinder or gentler. And don't bother looking at anybody else around you. Look at yourself. This is all for you, yourself, and I. Yeah? This is where we've got to go with our behavior. Yeah? Honeycomb speaks very much to our behavior. It is elevating. Honeycomb speaks very much to our behavior. Is it elevating, lifting, generous, offering, sweet, produced by incredible shaking, vibration, and cracking open? Is this us? You sweet? All those words up there, all these words up there, to be shaking to pieces, quivering, vibrating, rubbing, sprinkling, soaring, lifting, all these things to strike, elevating us. These are all behaviors, guys. All behaviors. Is it elevate? Is this behavior? Is it elevating? Is it lifting? Is it generous, offering, sweet, produced by incredible shaking, vibration, and cracking open? Is this us in a situation in your day? Do you have any of these qualities? I don't. I've got to work on them. I've got to become these things. And you can't just use the excuse, oh, that's not my personality. I can't do it. That's not my personality. It's ridiculous. Make it your personality. Suck it up. Do it. You know, why? Because Yahusha says to. Yahusha says to have this behavior for yourself and for others, to lift the situation. So let's look at the Hebrew meaning of sweet. Fragrance, smell, spice, a good man or woman, beautiful, best, better, bountiful, cheerful, at ease, favour, fine, glad, good, joyful, kindly, kindness, loving, merry, pleasant, pleasure, precious, prosperity, ready, successful, vigour, also a sweet or fat cake, fresh, moisture, to be smooth, pleasant or sweet, not soured or bittered with yeast, like an unfermented cake or loaf, without leaven. To be sweet is to be without leaven, not soured or bittered with yeast. To be restful, agreeable and pleasant, to suck or relish or be made sweet, like sucking off the honeycomb, sucking off the ointment, sucking off the getting everything you can from Yahusha. To be restful, agreeable, to cross over, to cover, intercourse, carry over, overcome. Fresh grape juice as just trodden out, new sweet wine or rarely fermented wine. There are so many words we could go into there that speak about fresh anointing and fresh inspiration and all sorts of things. The new wine of teachings and all this sort of stuff Yahusha spoke about. We're not going to, but you can see how full this understanding is of being sweet. It's not just, sweet, that's sweet and lovely, isn't it? No. The depth of this word, sweet. And this all came from honeycomb. So, both Ezekiel and John in Revelation, not John, but John in Revelation, both Ezekiel and John were told to eat a scroll containing a message that would be sweet as honey to their mouth, but bitter to the stomach. Even Jeremiah said, your words were found, I ate them, and they became such a joy to me, and the delight of my heart. As we've gone on from the first principles of elated joy, like honey in our mouth, haven't we all been through that? The first, it's like wonderful being married and go, honeymoon stay, honeymoon. You know, in the first principles, repent, be immersed, get the Spirit. You're all full of joy. You want to tell everybody, walking and leaping and praising you. Yeah, elated joy, like honeycomb in our mouth, where Yahusha fills us with great joy and lets us get away with all our bad behaviors and ignorance for a time. So, as we've gone on from these first principles, we discover that Yahusha's words begin leaving an aftertaste, a bitter realization that makes us sick to our stomach. The metamorphosis has taken hold, and we start comparing ourselves to his living words like looking in a mirror, and all the poisonous wormwood bile starts burning out of us. So this message, this Besorah, this good news, this deliverance that came into us, this anointing, this portal that opened, and his Spirit that came within us was sweet to the taste. That's why we wanted it. We were desperate. We were down, broken, lost, and we cried out, and we got his Spirit, and we were alive, made alive. But then after a while, we start having a hideous experience. Why? Because all the poisonous wormwood bile starts burning out of us. But if we dig our heels in and stubbornly want our own way, our life to ourselves, then the shaking comes. Remember the honeycomb had to be shaken? The vibrating and the cracking open of our honeycombs so that the sweet honey can pour forth like luscious nectar, and the healing oil of joy overflows, allowing the gospel message of deliverance, which is only really effective when burning in us as a proof and example, allowing that to shine bright through a transformed behavior. It's time to shine. Did you realize that? The gospel message is useless if it's not activated in a human vessel. Yeah? That doesn't mean the word is useless, no. But no one's gonna, it's just words. It's just something written in a book, in the scriptures. It's just a message. It might even just be word of mouth. It's nothing unless it's seen. It has to be a light that shines from a person through a particular behavior in a certain instance. So I thought that was interesting when I heard that bit. The gospel has to be alive in us, otherwise it's useless. So it's time to shine. Life is much more pleasant if you let Yahusha's sweetness flow voluntarily. Go with his flow. Let the honey pour, from your honeycomb. Let it come voluntarily. Surrender, die. Rather than having to be constantly cracked in the head with his rod before you're willing to be pleasant and give over. Like a big piñata hanging from a tree. Do you want Yahusha to be constantly whacking the crap out of the honeycomb to try and get some kind of kindness, some kind of response, just for you to be nice and pleasant to be around? I've constantly needing it cracked over my head. Wouldn't go there. Wouldn't be kind. Wouldn't be nice. I hated this message. But it's so wonderful to get a simple word that tells us exactly the behavior. Even later on in Corinthians, I think it is, Yahusha's saying, when you see each other, speak to each other, uplift each other, psalms and spiritual songs, and be kind, greet each other with a set apart kiss. Like, it's love, joy, kindness, sweet. That's the word today, sweet honey from the honeycomb. He's going to get his honey. Got it? Yahusha is going to get his honey. So you can either give it over, or he will smash the shit out of you. He's going to get his honey. Yeah? Honey. Are the words from your mouth sweet and soothing to those around you? Because that's what he wants. That's what we've got. That's what we've got today from the Hebrew and from the scriptures. Soothing to the spirit and, healing to the body and uplifting to everybody around you. If you swim, it doesn't mean you don't get angry and instructing or teaching if you've got children, all that sort of thing. You know what I'm saying. It's about the behavior. Do you even make a conscious effort in your day to be kind and sweet to those around you? Because if you don't, you're going to get bashed with that big stick, bashing the hell out of the honeycomb. So you're sick of your honeycomb getting bashed? Then give over and be sweet.